Hey, so today's video for a change is going to be about another illness that I suffered, which was grief. And I know some people don't think grief is a mental illness, but actually it is. And so I suffered very, very badly from grief a few years ago. And basically, grief is something you go through, a process you go through when you lose somebody. Now it can be death, or certainly when you lose somebody at all. But mine was due to losing my grandpa, and that's sort of where my grief sort of spelled from. So they say with grief you can go through different stages, and it's like shock that you can't believe it's happened, then you deny, it's denial, then anger, then you bargain, then there's guilt, depression, then acceptance. And I agree with that, because you do go through certainly all of those different feelings and stages. But some people said that there's a process, like you go through it one after another, and to me that's not what happened to me. And one day I could be in denial, saying he didn't die, I can't believe he died, very, very in denial about it, when the next day I could be very angry about it, but then go back to shock. So for me, it definitely didn't happen in certain stages. It happened sort of all over the place. And today, I'm still, even today, I still, I've accepted it. But some days I am still very angry that it happened, and I still go through denial even today. So I think that sort of, if you're going through it, you sort of have to, it doesn't. You don't have to feel awkward or unusual if you don't happen to follow certain stages, because I certainly didn't. And people cope with grief in all types of ways. When I first lost my grandpa, my idea of was push down. I didn't really grieve for him. I sort of pushed down all the horrible feelings. I cried for the first few days, few weeks, but then after that I didn't. I pushed it all down, I didn't want to deal with it. And, other people talked about him, other people, cope in many different types of ways, but my idea was, to push all the feelings away and not deal with them. But then, it sort of took its toll on me, a year or so later, because I noticed that when anyone mentioned his name, or, mentioned anything about him, I couldn't hear it. I'd burst into tears. I couldn't talk about him, couldn't have reminders of him. I started getting very angry. I'd start, saying he wasn't dead, and it took its toll on me, the idea of that. So what I had to do was see a grief counsellor. Now I know a lot of people do see them, and some people don't even know they exist. But I saw a wonderful and amazing woman called Megan from Just Be. It's a company for bereavement, and I saw her for about over a year, and she completely helped me. She completely changed my life around. She helped me deal with all sorts of feelings. She made me talk about the day he died and the funeral, until I could say it without breaking down and crying. And she showed me techniques on how to deal with, if I have a day when I'm very angry about it, how to change it around, or how to deal with those strong emotions about being angry about it. And it was amazing. And she also helped me have like techniques involved for when I lose somebody else in the future. Because because I'll tell you a bit about my grandpa. He got cancer around Christmas time a few years ago. And he had an operation to get it removed, chemotherapy, and we thought it was all going really well. It was only a few months after the surgery we found out, that the chemo wasn't working, and that he only, only had a few weeks, if that, to live. So when we saw him every day, every time we saw him, you got the process of saying goodbye to him. And every time you saw him, you didn't know if it was going to be the last or not. So you got in the process of saying goodbye to him. And by the time, you know, he wasn't the grandpa I knew. As you know, he was very thin. He couldn't speak. You know, he was, you know, he wasn't the grandpa I always knew. So I sort of prepared myself that, you know, I've said goodbye. But when it actually happened, you know, it totally knocked me off my feet. You know, I thought because I've been saying goodbye to her every time that it was like it, but it wasn't. You know, I went in and saw him when he died, and you know, I spoke at the funeral, and but you know, it's very different is when you can prepare all you want for, if you know someone's dying, you can prepare for it and prepare for people. You have no idea how you're going to react to it until it happens. And I think that's one of the things I learned with Megan was, you know, she helped me, you know, understand it. You never know how you're going to react. But, you know, she helped me change my ways. Like, she taught me, you know, that I can speak to her about it, you know, family about it. I don't have to bottle all these horrible feelings that I felt, or, you know, these upset feelings. I don't have to push it away. I can talk about it, deal with it then, so that years later it isn't affecting me still. And I think that's one thing that I really, really, you know, recommend if you're really having trouble about grief, is to see a grief counsellor. And I mean, people don't really count grief as a mental illness, but it is, you know. Grief is a really strong feeling, and it can be when someone dies, or, you know, you can feel grief when, you know, your pet, you know, like if you know, like people split up, like you've been married a long time and you get a divorce, you grieve for that period, you grieve for that lost relationship, I suppose. And it's the same, you can, when you've lost somebody, it's still the same process. It just depends on how you act about it. It depends on the way it affects you. But I honestly believe, you know, that some people think they have to push it away or deal with it then by themselves, but you don't. You know, there are people out there like grief counsellors, or, you know, there is support groups. See, there's this group, there's specific grief groups, you know, that I joined, that really helped me talking to other people who was in the exact same boat as me deal with it. And I honestly think that if you're really struggling with it, you talk to other people, you know, strangers or a family member, or if you feel like it, you know, it's like it was mine, taking over your life and you just don't understand it anymore, then really seek out a grief counsellor. Because for me, it was the best decision I ever made, was to see that grief counsellor. And I can guarantee that I probably wouldn't be here now without her. I would have given up hope a long time ago. So I honestly believe that if you're struggling, don't struggle in silence. You know, just find a little window and ask for some help. So I know this is a shorter video than usual, but this was just one. You know, I've done other types of mental illness that I've gone through, and I wanted to do this one as well. So thank you.